Story 1. The Ghost in the Server Room. My job as a junior IT technician was mostly mundane: patch cables, reset passwords, and occasionally brave the Arctic chill of the server room. It was a windowless concrete bunker, filled with the relentless hum of machinery and the blinking symphony of indicator lights. The air was always dry, smelling faintly of ozone and dust. It was a place of logic and order, where every cable had its place, and every server had a purpose. It was early February 2024, and the winter outside was particularly brutal. But in the server room, the temperature was a constant, controlled 68 degrees Fahrenheit. I found a strange comfort in its predictability, the quiet hum a lullaby to my otherwise chaotic days. Then, the anomalies began. Not system failures, not network outages, but something far more subtle and unsettling. I'd be working late, alone in the building, and I'd hear it. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper, just at the edge of my hearing, coming from the server room. It wasn't loud enough to make out words, just a soft, sibilant murmur that seemed to slither through the cold air. I attributed it to the ventilation system, or perhaps the echoes of the city outside. But the whispers grew more frequent, more distinct, and always seemed to come from the same corner of the room, near the oldest, most neglected server rack. I started spending more time in the server room, trying to pinpoint the source, but it was elusive, shifting, always just beyond my grasp. The other servers, usually a symphony of rhythmic hums, began to sound off-key, their fans whirring erratically, their lights blinking out of sync. The air grew colder, and I'd feel a strange pressure in my head, a dull ache behind my eyes. I found myself staring at the blinking lights for long periods, mesmerized by their hypnotic dance, feeling a strange pull, a morbid curiosity to understand their secret. I started to bring a small, portable spectrum analyzer with me, hoping to detect the strange frequencies, but it always showed nothing. It was like the anomalies were happening on a level beyond conventional detection. A digital haunting. As the weeks passed, the anomalies escalated. The temperature in certain server racks would fluctuate wildly, despite the precision cooling systems. I'd find strange, intricate patterns etched into the dust on the server casings. Symbols that looked ancient and unsettling, almost like circuit diagrams from another dimension. The access control system would occasionally grant entry to non-personnel, their entry and exit logs perfectly recorded, but with no corresponding physical presence. I started to feel like I wasn't alone in the server room. The air grew thick with a faint, metallic scent, like burnt copper and something else, something organic and decaying. My colleagues, the day shift technicians, would joke about the server room having a mind of its own, but their laughter was hollow, tinged with a genuine unease. I started bringing a small, higher-resolution camera with me, hoping to capture evidence. But every time I reviewed the footage, it was just static or distorted images that made no sense. It was like the network was actively resisting my attempts to understand it, to expose its secrets. One night, during my routine check of the core network racks, I heard a low, guttural hum. It wasn't the usual hum of the servers. It was deeper, more resonant, vibrating through the very floor beneath my feet. The lights in the data center flickered wildly, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and twist on the walls. The monitoring screens displayed a single, chilling message, repeated over and over: "We are the network." My heart pounded in my chest. I stared at the message, my blood running cold. And then, from the depths of the server racks, tendrils of light, not electrical, but something else, something organic and pulsating, began to emerge. They snaked through the aisles, coiling around the servers, merging with the cables, becoming one with the network. The hum intensified, a deafening roar that vibrated through my very bones. I felt a searing pain in my head, like 1,000 needles piercing my brain. I fell to my knees, clutching my temples, trying to block out the overwhelming noise. And then, the red light pulsed one last time, and a voice, clear and resonant, filled my mind. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a command. It told me to open the server, to release what was trapped inside. I fought against it, my body racked with tremors, but the compulsion was too strong. My hands moved on their own, unlatching the side panel of the server. A blast of freezing air, smelling of decay and something ancient, hit me. And then, from the depths of the machine, a shadowy form began to coalesce. Tendrils of darkness reaching out, coiling around me. I screamed. I don't remember much after that, just a blinding flash of red, and then darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed, my body racked with tremors, my mind a jumble of distorted images and echoing hums. The doctors said I had suffered a severe psychotic break, a stress-induced hallucination. They found me unconscious in the server room, the server panel open, but nothing out of the ordinary. They said I was lucky to be alive. I never went back to that job. The data center still operates, a silent, humming fortress of information. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I can still hear that low, guttural hum, and I feel a cold dread creep up my spine, wondering if the network is still out there, growing, expanding, waiting for its next connection. And I wonder, was it really an electrical shock? Or did I, for a brief moment, become part of the network, a consciousness absorbed into the digital realm, only to be spat out, broken and scarred? The company eventually replaced all their old servers. But I still wonder, what did they find when they decommissioned that particular machine? And what, if anything, did I release? Story 2. The Cubicle Farm. My new job started like any other. It was a standard corporate gig, Cubicle Farm, open plan office. My cubicle was nestled between a chatty marketing intern and a quiet older gentleman named Mr. Henderson. He was always there when I arrived, and still there when I left. He never spoke, just typed away on his ancient keyboard, the click-clack, a constant backdrop to my day. He drank black coffee, always from the same chipped mug, and ate a plain bagel for lunch. It was June 2023, and the summer heat was oppressive. But the office AC kept things chilly, almost unnaturally so. I tried to make small talk a few times, a polite nod, a comment about the weather, but he'd just offer a slight, almost imperceptible nod in return, his eyes never leaving his screen. He was a creature of habit, and I respected his quiet dedication. Then, the smell started. Faint at first, like something vaguely metallic, then growing stronger, a sickly sweet odor that made my stomach churn. It seemed to emanate from Mr. Henderson's cubicle. I thought maybe he'd spilled something, or forgotten some food. I tried to ignore it, but it was persistent, clinging to the air, making it hard to concentrate. I'd spray air freshener, light-scented candles, anything to mask it, but it always returned. The marketing intern next to me didn't seem to notice, or at least, never commented. I started to wonder if it was just me, if I was imagining it. But the smell was undeniably real, a constant, nauseating presence, as the smell intensified. So did other things. I'd hear faint scratching sounds from his cubicle, similar to the first story, but softer, more deliberate. Sometimes, a low, guttural moan, quickly stifled. I'd see him hunched over his desk, his shoulders shaking, but when I glanced over, he'd be perfectly still, typing away. His appearance began to change too. His skin grew paler, almost translucent, and dark circles bloomed under his eyes. He started wearing long-sleeved shirts, even in the sweltering summer heat. I noticed a faint, dark stain on the cuff of his shirt one day, a reddish-brown smudge that looked suspiciously like dried blood. I tried to tell myself it was just coffee, or a pen mark, but the thought lingered. I started taking longer lunch breaks, finding excuses to be away from my desk, away from the smell, away from Mr. Henderson. One morning, I arrived at the office early, hoping to get some work done before the smell became too overwhelming. Mr. Henderson was already there, as usual. But something was different. The air was thick with the sickly sweet odor, stronger than ever before, and there was a new sound, a faint, rhythmic dripping. It was coming from his cubicle. My heart pounded, in my chest. I crept closer, my breath catching in my throat. The dripping sound grew louder, a steady, sickening rhythm. I peered over the cubicle wall. Mr. Henderson was hunched over his desk, his back to me. His shoulders were shaking violently. And then I saw it. On his desk, a large, metal bucket. And into the bucket, slowly, steadily, dripped a thick, dark liquid. It was blood. And next to the bucket, on a small white plate, was a neatly arranged pile of human fingers. They were pale, almost translucent, and some had rings still on them. Mr. Henderson was meticulously cleaning them with a small brush, humming a tuneless melody. He looked up then, his eyes wide and vacant, a thin smile stretching across his pale lips. He didn't say a word. He just offered me a finger. I screamed. I don't remember much after that. Just running out of the office, out into the street, not caring where I went. I never went back. The police investigated, but they found nothing. No Mr. Henderson, no bucket, no fingers. Just an empty cubicle, and a faint, lingering smell that only I seemed to notice. I still see him sometimes, in my nightmares, offering me a finger, his vacant eyes staring into mine. And I wonder, what happened to the marketing intern? I tried to forget about Mr. Henderson, about the smell, about the fingers. I got a new job, in a different city, a different industry. I even went to therapy, trying to convince myself it was all a hallucination, a stress-induced breakdown. But the images, the smells, they lingered. Every time I saw a black coffee, every time I smelled something vaguely metallic, every time I heard a faint scratching sound, I was transported back to that cubicle, to that horrifying morning. I started to avoid open-plan offices, preferring the solitude of a private workspace, or even working from home. But even there, the paranoia gnawed at me. Was I truly safe? Or was Mr. Henderson just a symptom of a deeper, more pervasive horror that lurked beneath the mundane surface of corporate life? One day, months later, I was browsing a local news website, trying to distract myself, when a headline caught my eye. Local marketing intern reported missing. It was the intern from my old office, the one who had sat next to me, the one who never seemed to notice the smell. A cold dread washed over me. I clicked on the article, my hands shaking. The details were sparse, just a brief description, a grainy photo. But then, I saw it. A small, almost imperceptible detail in the background of the photo, a faint, dark smudge on the cuff of her shirt, a reddish-brown smudge. My blood ran cold. It was the same stain I had seen on Mr. Henderson's shirt, the same color, the same shape. It couldn't be a coincidence. It couldn't be. I closed the laptop, my mind racing. The police had found nothing, no Mr. Henderson, no bucket, no fingers. But now, the intern was missing, and that stain, it was a clue, a horrifying, undeniable link. I wanted to tell someone, to scream it, from the rooftops, but who would believe me? Who would believe a story about a quiet old man in a cubicle and a bucket of human fingers? They'd think I was crazy, just like the doctors had. So I kept it to myself, a dark secret, festering, in my mind. But the knowledge, the terrifying certainty, was a burden I could barely bear. I started to see Mr. Henderson everywhere, in the faces of strangers on the street, in the shadows of my apartment, in the depths of my own reflection. His vacant eyes, his thin smile, his outstretched finger. He was a phantom, a constant reminder of the horror I had witnessed. The horror that had consumed my colleague, and was now, slowly, surely, consuming me. I knew, deep down, that I would never truly escape him. He was a part of me now, a chilling echo of a nightmare that had become my reality, and I wondered how many more people would disappear before someone finally believed me. How many more fingers would be added to his collection? The thought was a constant torment, a silent scream. Trapped within my own mind, I was a prisoner of my own memories, haunted by the ghost of a cubicle neighbor and the lingering scent of decay. And sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet, I could almost hear him, humming that tuneless melody, meticulously cleaning his latest acquisition, and I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that he was still out there, still collecting, and I was just another one of his stories, waiting to be told. Story 3. The conference room. Our company had recently moved into a new office building, a sleek, modern high-rise downtown. Everything was state-of-the-art, glass walls, ergonomic chairs, and a fancy coffee machine that made lattes. The conference rooms were particularly impressive, with massive screens and smart whiteboards. I was excited about the change, a fresh start. It was October 2024, and the autumn air was crisp, the city lights twinkling outside the panoramic windows. My team was working on a big presentation, and we were spending a lot of late nights in Conference Room B, perfecting our slides. We'd order takeout, crack jokes, and try to keep our spirits up. It was a typical crunch time, nothing unusual. Then, the whispers started, faint at first, like a distant murmur, coming from the conference room when no one was inside. I'd be walking past, and I'd hear what sounded like hushed conversations, sometimes laughter, sometimes a low, angry tone. I'd peek in, but the room would be empty, the chairs neatly tucked under the table. I figured it was the ventilation system, or maybe sounds carrying from another floor. But the whispers were too distinct, too human. They seemed to follow a pattern, rising and falling, almost like a debate. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my work, but the sound was unsettling, a constant background noise to my thoughts. As the whispers grew louder, they became more coherent. I started to pick out words, phrases. They were always about us, my team. They knew our names, our projects, even our personal quirks. He's slacking off again, I heard one night, a cold, accusatory voice, and I knew they were talking about me. Another time, she's going to mess up the presentation, a venomous hiss, and I saw my colleague, Sarah, flinch, even though she was wearing headphones. The air in the conference room grew heavy, oppressive. The lights would flicker, the smart whiteboard would display strange, garbled messages, and the coffee machine would dispense black, bitter liquid instead of lattes. We started avoiding the conference room, making excuses to work from our desks. But the whispers seemed to follow us, echoing in the hallways, seeping into our cubicles. We were all on edge, our nerves frayed, but no one dared to speak about it openly. It was an unspoken terror, a shared secret that bound us together in fear. One evening, just before the big presentation, our manager insisted we do one final run-through. In Conference Room B, the whispers were deafening now, a cacophony of angry voices, swirling around us like a storm. The lights flickered wildly, casting long, dancing shadows that danced on the faces of my colleagues. The smart whiteboard displayed a single, chilling message, repeated over and over. You are not alone. We tried to ignore it, to focus on our presentation, but the voices were relentless, tearing us down, exposing our insecurities, our failures. Then, the screen on the main display flickered, and a distorted image appeared. It was a live feed from a hidden camera, showing us sitting at the table, our faces pale with fear, and behind us, standing in the doorway, were shadowy figures, tall and gaunt, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. They weren't human, they were just there, watching, judging. The whispers reached a crescendo, a chorus of condemnation. We screamed, we ran, we didn't stop until we were out of the building, out on the street, gasping for air. We never went back to that office. The company went bankrupt a few months later, citing unforeseen circumstances. I still see my former colleagues sometimes, their eyes haunted, their smiles forced. We never talk about what happened in Conference Room B, but we all know. We all remember the whispers, the shadows, the feeling of being watched. And we all know that some things, once seen, can never be unseen. The building stands empty now, a dark, silent monolith in the city skyline. But sometimes, late at night, if you listen closely, you can still hear the whispers echoing from the empty conference rooms, waiting for the next team to arrive. I tried to forget about Conference Room B, about the whispers, about the shadows. I got a new job, in a different city, a different industry. I even went to therapy, trying to convince myself it was all a hallucination, a stress-induced breakdown. But the images, the sounds, they lingered. Every time I saw a glass-walled conference room, every time I heard a faint murmur, every time I felt a strange chill in the air, I was transported back to that office, too. That horrifying night, I started to avoid open-plan offices, preferring the solitude of a private workspace, or even working from home. But even there, the paranoia gnawed at me. Was I truly safe? Or was Conference Room B just a symptom of a deeper, more pervasive horror that lurked beneath the mundane surface of corporate life? One day, months later, I was browsing a local news website, trying to distract myself, when a headline caught my eye. Former tech company building demolished after unexplained incidents. It was my old office building, the one with Conference Room B. A cold dread washed over me. I clicked on the article, my hands shaking. The details were sparse, just a brief description, a grainy photo of the demolition site. But then, I saw it, a small, almost imperceptible detail in the background of the photo, a faint, almost translucent shimmer in the air. Just above the rubble, where Conference Room B used to be. My blood ran cold. It was the same distortion I had seen on the screen, the same shimmering presence. It couldn't be a coincidence. It couldn't be. I closed the laptop, my mind racing. The company had gone bankrupt, citing unforeseen circumstances. But now, the building was being demolished, and that shimmer. It was a clue, a horrifying, undeniable link. I wanted to tell someone, to scream it from the rooftops, but who would believe me? Who would believe a story about whispering shadows in a haunted conference room? They'd think I was crazy, just like the doctors had. So I kept it to myself, a dark secret festering in my mind. But the knowledge, the terrifying certainty, was a burden I could barely bear. I started to see the shadows everywhere, in the corners of my apartment, in the reflections on glass, in the depths of my own reflection. They were phantoms, constant reminders of the horror I had witnessed. The horror that had consumed my colleagues, and was now, slowly, surely, consuming me. I knew, deep down, that I would never truly escape them. They were a part of me now, a chilling echo of a nightmare that had become my reality. And I wondered, how many more buildings would be demolished before someone finally believed me? How many more whispers would be heard before the truth was revealed? The thought was a constant torment, a silent scream trapped within my own mind. I was a prisoner of my own memories, haunted by the ghost of a conference room and the lingering feeling of being watched. And sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet, I could almost hear them, the voices of the shadows, debating my fate, judging my every move. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that they were still out there, still watching. And I was just another one of their stories, waiting to be told.